Part 25. I am the strongest officer of the Straw Hats. Author, Super Red. Chapter 243. Tisk, what a pity. After thinking about it, I couldn't help but feel a little regret in my heart. I didn't trick the Empress Boya Hancock into boarding the ship before on 9 Snake Island. Otherwise, with the blessing of the Empress's sweet fruit, I would be caught off guard and this guy would definitely tell me the color of his underwear. It's a pity that this opportunity only comes once. If you miss it, you won't get it. So close. The bald 5-old star who woke up was really scared and broke out in a cold sweat. It was almost, but fortunately it was almost. Fortunately, he stopped his mouth in the end and did not reveal Master Yumu's secret, otherwise he would be finished if he went back. Snort. The world government knows far more than you think. Pluto has sunk long ago. Even if you have the design drawings of Pluto, judging from your adventure experience, you will not have time to build it. The bald 5-old star spoke eloquently. Use facts to prove that what he said is true. The only thing that can compete with the power of God is the power of another God. Are you so arrogant that you think you can resist this natural disaster with your own power? The bald 5-old star grinned, with disdainful sarcasm at the corner of his mouth. As the facts came out one by one, his originally anxious heart gradually calmed down. The three ancient weapons that symbolize the ultimate power. Pluto is sleeping, and Neptune has not yet grown up. The only one who can show his great power is the King of Heaven in his hand, Uranus. As for Bayou, he admitted that this guy's ability is indeed terrifying beyond imagination. It is unimaginable that such a powerful young man can be born in the current sea. The individual strength is so terrifying that even he himself is far from his opponent. Roger, who was known as the Pirate King at the time, would have to be defeated in front of him. I really don't know what kind of devil fruit he took, but it actually has such terrifying potential. But, humans are humans after all. No matter how powerful the fruit is, it will always pale in comparison to the power of natural disasters. You are right. With my current strength, I cannot resist ancient weapons. Bayou nodded, with a look of approval. Snort. Want to give in? Late. You must die today. The eyes of the bald 5-old star are full of poisonous resentment. He has aged for 10 years, and now he is surrendering? Dreaming. Death is the only way back for this group of pirates. Moreover, they must all be buried in the belly of the fish. Death is a must. He had to die in an ugly way, otherwise how could he be worthy of his precious 10 years? Subdued. You seem to have misunderstood something. Neptune and Pluto are indeed of no use for the time being as you said, but the King of Heaven is still there. Bayou raised his eyebrows, with a strange smile on his lips. God, King of Heaven. What do you mean? The bald 5-star was startled. He seemed to have thought of something terrifying. For the first time, a look of panic appeared on his old god's face. Although it only flashed by, it was absolutely real. It doesn't mean anything, it's just a literal meaning. Bayou's faint voice sounded on the field. The bald 5-old star, who understood the meaning of his words, could no longer suppress the uneasiness in his heart. The strong calmness on his face was completely destroyed by the uneasiness in his heart. His eyes were clear. Unconsciously, I was infected with a little fear. You want to say that you also have the power of the King of Heaven? Impossible. You are definitely lying to me. Yes, you are lying to me. You want to pretend to be so confident to scare me off, right? Ha ha ha. The bald 5-old star raised his head and laughed, his eyes shining. He pretended to be calm and looked at Bayou calmly. The look on his face is I have already seen through everything and will never fall into a trap. Laugh. Bayou sneered and shook his head. The power of King Uranus is not exclusive to you. Don't forget, on the astronomical model, There are 6 stars orbiting the world. Bai said in a faint tone, staring at the sky, as if he meant something. Could it be, impossible? Bai's pretended to be mysterious words instantly destroyed his forced composure. Uneasiness began to take over his indifferent face. Before he could say anything more, a long red dragon of blood suddenly shuttled through the sky. The long dragon of blood gradually dispersed, revealing Bai's figure inside. Red steam rises from his body, and the silver hair tips are pregnant with strong will. Bai lowered his eyes, as if he was comprehending and groping for something. The destructive power entrenched in his heart was driven back by Bai not long after he recovered. Jing Kunluo rushed out towards Jing Kunluo on his right, like a river opening its gates to release floods, rushing in crazily. The sharp blade was soon stained with a dark color. Not good. No, don't worry, no matter how strong you are, it's only the strength of a mortal. No matter how powerful the fruit is, it will never be able to resist natural disasters. He is definitely bluffing. As time went by, the power on Bai's body became more and more solemn. It was so heavy that it became difficult for him to breathe. The bald 5 old stars had already smelled the smell of death from him. If it weren't for Uranus I relied on him. Normally, he would have turned around and ran away immediately, without any hesitation. Even so, there was still a strong uneasiness in his heart. If he hadn't repeatedly worked hard to brainwash and build his mind, he felt that I can hardly maintain my posture anymore. Are you still unwilling to face reality? Bai curled his lips and opened his hands slightly, as if he was pulling something. Then let me break your fantasy. The corners of Bai's mouth cracked and he shouted loudly. As his voice fell, the slightly dim sky suddenly burst into bright light. Another star actually appeared. Moreover, it is even bigger than the previous star. Is today the end of the world? Why are the stars in the sky one after another? East, a star like a morning star, hanging high in the sky and blooming with brilliant light. For a moment, it directly suppressed the brightness of another star and the sun. There was only one color left in the sky, emitting light and heat wantonly. As if to cater for his presence, the sea was already rough with currents. Suddenly, it rolled violently, as if it had been hit by medicine. Shocking waves hundreds of meters high were unleashed, and all the mud on the seabed was washed up. On the turbid sea, there are undercurrents everywhere, hiding endless murderous intent. Under the influence of 2 opposing tidal forces, huge waves kept rising, hitting, and fighting each other, splashing endless water mist. Showing that his power is real, this is by no means some illusion, but another real star. I am the strongest officer of the Straw Hats. Author, Super Red. Chapter 244. How can you have the power of God? How is the power of the Creator possible? The bald 5 old star was stunned when he looked at the huge star in the sky. Waving the generation ghost in his hand in disbelief, he struggled to drive the power of the King of Heaven to maximize the influence of the tidal force, hoping to break the illusion in front of him. But the huge vibrations on the sea and the collision of waves told him again and again that the power in front of him was real. It is definitely not an illusion, nor is it a scene that can be created by a devil fruit. But for real, another force of Heavenly King. Actually, it's actually true. The bald 5 old star had a scratchy throat and choked up when he spoke. In his heart, the guess that was considered impossible was confirmed, and he is now in a state of broken worldview. He has disappeared for countless years, and the world government has consumed after exhausting countless efforts to search for it. He found no trace of the 6th planetary control power, and it actually appeared in front of him. And the holder was actually Lord Im, the guy who ordered the killing. This kind of probability, this kind of power probability. 2. If he knew about science, he would have shouted that it was unscientific. How can it be? The bald five-old star looked at the sky and the battlefield with a doubtful look on his face. There was an illusion as if I was in a dream. Am I dreaming? Fujitora, who was struggling to lift the main ship and protect the surviving navy from the wind and waves, looked at the shaking stars in the sky, and his face couldn't help but look weird. Got up. His ability to squeeze the gravity fruit reached its limit, and his face remained calm. Now, the corners of his eyes actually started to twitch. Hey, isn't this really Jin Kunluo's power? Fujitora couldn't help but make a face towards Sengoku. Nonsense. Warring State stared at the sky, wanting to cry without tears. That boy Baiyu, every move was obviously driven by Jin Kunluo, plus some secrets about Jin Kunluo were recently discovered. Jin Kunluo is related to Uranus. The possibility is more than 90%, and it can basically be used as a stone hammer. It can't be that boy Baiyu thought it was the right time, so he deliberately imitated the gestures of the five old stars. Hey. Seeing the change in Fujitora's face, Zango felt his eyes hurt. Who would it be, staring at a wrinkled anus, winking at him all the time, waiting for a response, and it would be so uncomfortable. The opportunity so close to the final power was actually controlled by someone like this, and it was thrown away by one of his own hands. Warring State's heart was bleeding with distress. He shouldn't throw Jin Kunluo away, it would be better if he keeps it for himself. During the Warring States period, I looked up at the sky and wanted to cry but had no tears. Why do I always have tears in my eyes? Because the sand sculptures under my control have pitted me so deeply. Damn it! Could Jin Kunluo's guess be true? Could it be that it really contains the secrets of ancient weapons and was cracked by the sky? Fujitora, who had not received a response for a long time, suddenly felt something bad. No answer is the best answer. After realizing this, his face looked aggrieved and depressed. In the hands of the Navy, after holding it for so long, he only discovered the clues recently. As a result, just a short time after it was in someone else's hands, the secrets sealed inside were completely cracked, and they were used on the spot, turning the gun to deal with it. Is there any justice for this? Even the good-tempered Fujitora couldn't help but want to curse. He clenched his fists tightly, looking like he was furious, but fortunately he was broad-minded and fat. Fujitora, if he had been replaced by Akainu from earlier, he would have been pissed to death on the spot. Could it be related to Fujitora's anomaly? Could this accident be caused by our navy? Affected by the strange expressions of Fujitora and Sengoku, Green Bull suddenly felt something bad. A trace of panic flashed on his handsome face. No, you can't take the blame. A stern look flashed in Green Bull's eyes, and he quickly used two strong winds at his fingertips to hit Sengoku and Fujitora silently. Of course, it wasn't to kill and silence them. If Green Bull had the ability to kill them both instantly with a finger gun, Green Bull would also. There's no need to hang around here. I'm just taking the opportunity to wake them up and make them calm down. Otherwise, if the five old stars notice something, the Navy will really be in disgrace. We have just rounded up a few high-level officials who are suspected of being undercover, and it is discovered that they want to get their hands on ancient weapons. What is your Navy trying to do? Properly support the troops and respect themselves and want to rebel. Clang. Clang. Sengoku and Fujitora quickly came to their senses. They looked at each other and understood each other's intentions in a matter of minutes. They all looked up to the sky, pretending to be shocked to cover up the unwillingness and panic in their eyes, and pretending to be unaware of anything. The five old stars, who were immersed in the shock of another star appearing and causing the sky to collapse, are still immersed in their own world and find it difficult to accept the reality. Of course, they were unaware of the changes in the expressions of the Navy's top brass. However, Baiyu, who had been paying attention to the changes on the field, did not miss these things. All at a glance. Tisk, it seems that the relationship between the Navy in Aokiji's hands and the world government is not as close as it seems on the surface. Baiyu smacked his mouth, and there was an inexplicable look in his eyes. Judging from the swaying looks of these guys, the Navy has definitely not shared the secrets contained in Jinkun Luo with the world government. Jinkun Luo equals Heavenly King, part of Auranos. Conspiracy against Jinkun Luo equals conspiracy against Auranos. In other words, the Navy secretly plotted ancient weapons without telling the world government. Although it is not known which party gave the instruction, whether it came from Aokiji or the Warring States period, but what is certain is, the world government and the Navy are definitely not monolithic. They are not fuel-efficient lamps. Baiyu chuckled and shook his head. As expected, none of these guys from the old era are simple. Although he saw through the mystery, he had no intention of telling it. Instead, he suppressed the smile in his eyes and looked at the dull bald Wulaoxing coldly. Now, it's time for you to face reality. The dark colors lit up on Jinkun Luo. Like ink rendering, half of the sky was soon blackened. Baiyu raised his eyes levelly, and a faint murderous intention emerged in his cold eyes. Damn pirates! Despicable mortal, what if you blaspheme the power of God? At worst, you will fight to the death. I want to see which Uranus you control is more powerful, or the Uranus in my hand is stronger. The indifferent gaze returned to the eyes of the bald five-old star. The first-generation ghost in his hand exuded a coquettish bloodlight, and the dark ink color formed a confrontation. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I am the strongest officer of the Straw Hats. Author, Super Red. Chapter 245. It's a pity for these mortals below. The power of ancient weapons collides, causing natural disasters that cannot be resisted by ordinary people. No matter how powerful the fruit user is, they can still only wallow in death under such endless natural disasters. He said words of pity and sympathy, but in the eyes of the bald five-old stars, there was no trace of mercy. There was only endless indifference and aloof indifference. The tens of thousands of naval soldiers below, and the tens of thousands of Wano country in his eyes, the people who are planning are just like ants, and he does not take them into consideration at all. Even the top combat powers of the Navy generals and even the 3 generals may be sacrificed in his heart. People who ignore life, it's so cold, it makes people feel chilly. Let us fight against each other, show the power of natural disasters, and annihilate everything in this world. Ha ha ha. The bloody sword was raised high, like a blade announcing the end. He raised his head and laughed, full of murderous intent. Or, you can just surrender, and in the name of the world government, I will spare your companion's life, and you will be exempted from trial on Judiciary Island, and will not be imprisoned in Impel Down City if you are acquitted. As for you, after handing over the controller of Auranos, I can give you a way out. Choose to fight to the death and push all life into the abyss? Or choose to surrender and let everyone have hope of life? I'm looking forward to your decision. Wu Laoxing cracked the corners of his mouth and showed a malicious smile. They are all your friends over there. The low words seemed to be filled with the devil's bewitchment. Baiyu, don't fall into this guy's scheme. He must be lying to you, don't believe it. With the help of the power of Wawa fruit, Robin's voice came from all directions. He was afraid that Baiyu would surrender and give up his final counterattack because of them. Robin is right. We don't want to surrender. I am a man who wants to become the Pirate King. How can I fail here? Everyone can definitely win as long as they work hard. The nervous Luffy started shouting dissatisfiedly when he heard the surrender. Compared with not having meat to eat, something more terrifying happened: surrender. Stupid captain, do you understand or not? There is no way we can resist the power of this kind of natural disaster. If I had known, I wouldn't have eaten the silence fruit. Upso burst into tears with a cry, his face filled with snot and tears. As a person with abilities cursed by the sea, he will lose strength as soon as he touches the sea water. It is simply a dream to escape from the Wanyang Sea. Li Bu, do you want the vice captain to surrender in exchange for our safety? Frankie, who was in the mecha can, spoke angrily. How is it possible? Absolutely not, Upso refused without thinking. Our Ranos is the only force that can resist natural disasters, and we can't hand it over no matter what. No big deal, just, let's give it a try. As long as the vice captain still has that power, then, it will be fine. Even if as long as the vice captain is here, we will definitely be able to avenge us, and, Enel can fly, Jinbi can swim, they will all be safe. Even though I was crying and crying out of fear, I was sobbing and talking at the same time, and my words were all broken. Upso still had no intention of letting go. Even if he knew that under this choice, he could not escape at all and could only face death. He still didn't hesitate for a moment. Lai Buletin, you are too bad today. Frankie looked surprised. He was so surprised by his choice that he couldn't even find an adjective for a moment. Wow! Upso, you are so cowardly today. Luffy gave a thumbs up with appreciation and said what everyone was thinking. Although my flying ability relies on electric energy and is not enough to cross the sea, I also agree with Upso's opinion and must not surrender. Enilu waved the golden stick in his hand, and the taiko drum on his back sounded without any wind. Thunder and lightning were roaming around his body, and his hip-hop face was full of defiance. I can indeed swim. But I'm not sure how far I can swim in the tide, but surrender is not a word in the Fishman's dictionary, and I agree. Jinbei grinned, revealing his sharp white teeth. His ferocious face was filled with the pride of living and dying together with his companions. Me too. Count me in. And me, and me. The figures of different heights and faces all said the same thing. There were so many companions on the ship who all said the same thing, and not even a single different voice appeared. Ha, what a deep companionship. The bald 5 old star sneered, and the cold light in his eyes became increasingly cold. They risked their lives to support you, but what about your decision? Should we enjoy their kindness and exchange their lives for a fight of will, or should we give up useless face and give them a chance to survive? The malice in the smile on the bald 5 old star's ferocious face became even more serious. It was clear that he wanted to kill people and had no regard for life, but he chose to put this responsibility on Bayou. The blood on the first-generation ghost's body was extremely rich. It seems that as long as Bayou says half of the word yes, Uranus will be completely stimulated. Enable polar collision. Judging from the indifference to life in his eyes, he is definitely not afraid of causing a natural disaster. Hey, is this guy serious? Seeing that the great collision between heaven and earth was about to begin, the uneasy Green Bull couldn't help but give Fujitora a look on his face. It's come to this, what do you think? Fujitora's eyes were closed, and a trace of sadness flashed across his face. Can't we save them after all? Depend on it? No way. With this kind of terrifying tidal force, even in our heyday, we have no chance of escaping. Paying such a high price to get a group of pirates? Is it worth it? The heartbroken Fujitora couldn't give him any response, so Green Bull had no choice but to throw him at Sengoku. Value. Sengoku lowered his eyes sadly. Based on his understanding of the world government and the celestial dragons. Although they allowed the pirates to develop and did nothing to deal with the rebellion on the sea. They just issued bounties casually and then left them to the navy for disposal. But as long as they face threats to their rule, the will and determination that the world government will erupt will definitely far exceed all of their expectations. Not to mention the tens of thousands of soldiers who can be recruited at will in their eyes, even they a seemingly high-ranking general, a hero, a retired marshal, who can't be given up. It's purely based on whether it's worth it. Unfortunately, as of now, the value of Bayou's performance. Totally worth it? I am the strongest officer of the Straw Hats. Author, Super Red. Chapter 246. Now, the outcome of everything depends on his decision. Warring States looked at Bayou not far away, his eyes were extremely deep. Although I have had this awareness for a long time, it is inevitable that when things happen, I will feel a faint sense of sadness. White Feather. Deputy Captain. Under the scorching gazes of the people below, Bayou was walking in the air as if he was unconscious. Step on step, stepping in the air, the empty air seemed to form a thick staircase under his feet. The slender figure walked on it, making a crisp sound, and looked first class. Snored. Even when he was about to die, he was still pretending. I want to see how long you can continue to be arrogant. The bald five-old star snorted coldly in his heart and cursed secretly. Now, it's time to make your decision. Decide. Bayou raised his eyebrows with a strange look on his face. Certainly. Do you choose to admit defeat and call out Auranos, or let these companions who are willing to sacrifice their lives for you face death for your sake? The first-generation ghost Tetsu's blood was shining brightly, and he once again put pressure on Bayou in front of him. Force him to make an immediate decision without giving him any chance to delay. Laugh. Bayou sneered, and his expression became even more strange. If you fool children like this, you'd better stop it. Hand over Auranos and let us live. Do you think I am so easy to deceive because I look like a 3-year-old? Bayou chuckled and shook his head, pointing to his handsome face. He didn't take the threat of the bald five-old stars to heart at all. Then you just want your partner to face death with you for the sake of your face. The face of the bald five-old star turned cold. His indifferent eyes were full of murderous intent. The first-generation ghost in his hand seemed to be responding to his words, and the coquettish blood began to spread. In one sentence, Bayou was forced to force we've reached a dead end. You can try. Bayou, who shook his head and chuckled, suppressed the smile on his face. His gentle eyes suddenly changed, turning into a coldness that made people feel cold in their hearts. Do you think I dare not? The bald five-old stars shouted loudly. The star hanging high above his head burst into brilliant light, and the undercurrent driven by the tidal force directly engulfed several ships on the sea. There were many casualties on the field, and the lives lost were unknown. A few. The ruthless tactics told everyone present how firm his determination was. Ah! The only response he received was Bayou's sneer. If you dare to do it? I don't mind if I go to the Holy Land Marijoya another day. Bayou frowned coldly, not showing any weakness at all. The morning star like star in the east, as if in response to his determination, also burst out with brilliant light, not inferior to the other star in the slightest. Although there is no subsequent tidal force, no one dares to underestimate him. You dare. The bald five-old star shouted violently, his beard and hair hanging out with anger. A terrifying aura emanated from him, and a domineering aura overwhelmed the field. The soldiers with the strength of a lieutenant general or below were immediately blackened before their eyes and fainted. Those who were not fainted also. It's not that good. The bloodthirsty pressure is like Mount Tai pressing down on top. The thick blood makes people breathless. You can bet on whether I dare or not. Bayou curled his lips disdainfully. Do you want to overwhelm him with this little momentum? Are you kidding? His face turned cold, 3 colors of domineering energy spurted out, and an even more terrifying overlord color emerged from him, overwhelming his momentum without even a moment. With hesitation. Or alternatively, bet on whether I can survive a natural disaster. Bayou raised his eyebrows, condensed his eyes, and showed his power without reservation. The raging thunder roamed around his body, and the hot flames turned into wings behind him. The extremely powerful sword intention appeared from his hand, and the galloping the water turned into a throne and lifted him up. What a terrifying power! The domineering and intuitive display made Wu Laoxing's heart tremble. The swordsmanship that beat him until he was unable to fight back was actually not the opponent's full strength. No, it's not over yet, there is still a chance. No matter how strong the ability is, in the face of natural disasters, there will be a day when the strength is exhausted. I haven't lost yet. Yes, I haven't lost yet. There must still be a chance. The bald 5 old stars, holding on to the first-generation ghost, their eyes filled with bloodshot eyes. It's not over yet. Bai Yu chuckled, raised his left hand slightly and snapped his fingers. A tall portal was suspended beside him, showing the vast world behind the door. Dozens of different fruit abilities were looming on him. Terrifying power, enough to defeat the confidence of all his opponents. Door fruit. Looking at the door that suddenly appeared, and the world shrouded in white light behind the door. The bald 5 old stars were completely cracked. Although it was different from the green light recorded in the fruit manual, other details were exactly the same, whether it was patterns, the appearance methods are all consistent. It is definitely the door fruit. Damn it! The bald 5-star's heart ached. He felt like he was falling into an abyss. Ever since he recognized the power of this fruit, he no longer had any hope in relying on the power of Auranos to kill Bai Yu. Door fruit, demon the superhuman fruit type, any object touched by the hand of the fruit power user will turn into a door and can be opened. You can open the door and enter and exit freely anywhere. It is called a bug mobility ability, and you can travel through space at will. The only drawback is that you can focus on escape is very lacking in attack. But, the bald 5 old stars are looking at distributing power wantonly. Thunder, fire, water flow, sword intent, magnetism, they control dozens of abilities, and they are all developed to a certain extent. Layers of white feathers. Guru. I couldn't help but swallow the saliva. The terrifying strength of this guy, even Lord I'm. The bald 5 old star shook his head crazily, trying hard to get rid of the speculation that he shouldn't have from his mind. Compared to I'm Sama. But this idea seemed to have taken root, completely rooted in his heart. Once it appears, it is difficult to get rid of. But no matter what, the bald 5 old stars still can't think of fighting Bai Yu. This guy is a monster. It is simply not an existence that can be defeated by force. You, what on earth do you want to do? The voice of the bald 5 old star couldn't help but choke up, and he no longer had the arrogant attitude before. The eyes looking at Bai Yu also changed from the coldness before to the deep fear now, and there was even a hint of trepidation. Fear of nothing. It should be what you want to do, right? From beginning to end, it seems that you have been forcing me. Bai Yu smiled slightly and kicked the ball back directly. He is not the only one who knows how to blame others. After gaining absolute strength, he sometimes deliberately delegates the initiative. On the contrary, it is easier to gain an advantage. I am the strongest officer of the Straw Hats. Author, Super Red. Chapter 247. You. The bald 5 old star looked at him deeply. Cut. Bai Yu curled his lips and stared back. Who is afraid of whom? Could it be that he can kill people with his eyes? The power of the world government is far more powerful than you imagine. Hand over the power of Auranos, otherwise, you will not be able to bear the consequences of becoming our enemy. Lord I'm, you can't resist. Since he was not strong enough to threaten Bai Yu, Wu Laoxing was forced to have no choice but to move out of the backstage. How fresh, is it a bit new to bluff people? Do you think you can bear the consequences of being my enemy? Bai Yu didn't take his words to heart at all. Anyone who has watched One Piece doesn't know that I'm is the final boss. Who are you fooling by half covering and half exposed? Where do you think it leads this time? Could it be Marija? Bayou pushed it casually, and a door appeared in the air. Inside the door was a white space. And he had already stepped halfway to the portal. Do not go. The 5 stars of light shouted loudly. Their faces were completely panicked. If Bayou was really allowed to go to Marijoya, he would be caught off guard and hit the Holy Land with the tidal power of Uranus, the King of Heaven. The waves rolled. The impact caused by the sweep is definitely no less than that of detonating a nuclear bomb. If it affects the flowers and disturbs Master Yumu inside, then the result. Thinking of that kind of scene, he couldn't help but shudder. His whole body was covered with tears. It was so cold that my hands and feet were instantly frozen by the cold current. You win. Got it? They walk. The voice was squeezed out from between his teeth, word by word, and he spoke with gritted teeth. But the world government will never give up. Unless you hand over Auranos, you will never escape capture. Although he suffered a defeat, the bald 5-star star still did not forget to say a few words. Laugh. Walk. Come when you want, leave when you want, you are just playing house. Putting away the sneer on his face, Bayou's eyes were filled with coldness. Killing intent was permeated, the breath of Shura sea of blood filled the air, and the thick smell of blood spread all over the field. What do you want? The bald 5 star's heart sank. Now, it's hard to be kind. Since it is a war, of course the winner must get the spoils, and the loser must also pay the price. Bayou curled his lips with a smile on his face. Fighting monsters and dropping treasure chests is not a routine operation. What do you want, Bailey? Gem. Still gold. Wulaoxing made a cold face. After all, he is a pirate, and he can never escape his greedy nature. What do I want with all this waste paper? Of course I want devil fruit. Just like last time, 20 pills is not too much. Bayou looked at the bald man opposite him as if he were looking at a big mobile treasure box. His eyes were full of joy. He liked the captain of the transportation team the most. He just gave him 20 devil fruits last time, which made people feel happy. The strength has grown by leaps and bounds. Now here we come again? The world government, good people. 20. Impossible. The bald 5-star broke his voice directly. Devil fruits are not ordinary fruits, and even the world government has a limited collection. It took a lot of effort to find 20 garbage effects last time. In a short time, there's no way he can find people with so many rubbish abilities. Besides, even if the number is unlimited, he can't just agree. After all, judging from Bayou's growth rate, devil fruit will definitely be a big help to him. Now his strength is so terrifying. Okay, 20 more would be fine. What, you don't agree? A dangerous look flashed in Bayou's eyes, and the threat was almost clear. The last 20 devil fruits had already emptied the world government's reserves. This time there are 2 at most. As expected of the 5 stars, the higher your position, the more shameless you are, and you can cut it to 1/10 when you open your mouth. You are bargaining at the vegetable market. This is life money, at least 18. Bald's bargaining skills almost made Bayou spit out a mouthful of salt soda. 3, no more. 17. 4, there is an emptiness within the world government, there is no one left. The 2 of them were quarreling with each other, going back and forth. Suddenly, a life and death battle turned into a bargain. The 5 stars were afraid of Bayou's attack on Marijoa, and Bayou was not afraid of the destruction of Waji country. 2 people, that's a real fight between 2 people, all they have to fight is their courage. 5, if there are more, then strength will decide everything. The bald 5 star stared at Bayou, refusing to give in. Compared with the destruction of tens of thousands of Marines after he got up, the consequences of the monster in front of him becoming stronger again were even more unacceptable to him. 10. Otherwise. Bai Yu's tone was faint, half of his foot had already stepped into the white world behind the door. Creak, creak. The sound of grinding gums was particularly harsh on a field where you could hear a pin drop. With eye contact, in the silent confrontation, the most tested thing is courage and will. Okay. I. Answer. Answer. Bald Five Queen's molars were broken, but she was still defeated in the end. 10 devil fruits will do. However, the bill can only be paid in installments. With the reserves of the world government, it can only give you 5 pieces first, and the remaining 5 will have to wait until it is collected. The bald Five-Old Star's eyes were bloodshot, and he stared at Bai Yu. He had the consciousness of fighting if he disagreed. It's not that such a big world government really can't even take out 10 devil fruits. And 10 devil fruits are given out at one time. The fruit, the price for making Bai Yu stronger, is not something he can afford. If it really comes to that, putting out fires is more important than filling holes. Good. In the eyes of Wu Laoxing, whose eyes almost bulged out, Bai Yu nodded slowly. Although the toad seemed to be able to squeeze out oil and water, but seeing that he was pushed to the end, looking like he was about to die, Bai Yu reluctantly gave up. Shut up. If you make him faint, wouldn't that mean you have nothing to lose? But, a bad smile appeared on the corner of Bai Yu's mouth. Essay. Standing in mid-air, the elegant figure suddenly moved. Turned into an afterimage and disappeared. What? The bald Five-Old Star's pupils shrank, and an unpleasant feeling emerged in his heart. Armed color Luiying. One sword style, secret meaning, one sword Rakshasa. The armament displayed is extremely domineering. The slender blade is wrapped with dark power of destruction. It melts all the power in Bai Yu's body, gathers them together in 1 second, and bursts out with bright brilliance. In an instant, he crosses over the distance in space, disappeared and appeared directly on the head of the Five-Old Stars. Asshole. Sweat dripped down from his forehead like water. The cold air from Tianlinggai made him experience the feeling of falling into an ice cave again. The knife had already reached the top of his head. The terrifying slash was not something that could be avoided at all. Effective. Resistance is the only option left. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I am the strongest officer of the Straw Hats. Author, Super Red. Chapter 248. Drinking blood, ghost killing. After finally erasing the power of destruction, the wound that had barely healed burst open instantly under his influence. Red blood spurted out, as if it was free of charge, and rushed towards the first-generation ghost sword. In the blink of an eye, the scarlet blade had turned into a heavy black-red color. The red blade was cut out from the blade and flew into the sky. Like a giant river of blood, it fiercely hit the slash across the sky. The ultimate black light swallowed everything. Light, air, sound, all media, transmission, were annihilated and turned into nothingness. Everyone present only felt that their eyes were black, and when their vision was restored again. Click, the sound of things breaking, the first to seize the opportunity everyone's attention. While they were stunned, the blood-stained first-generation ghost had already met the pitch-black Jing Kunluo. The tip of the pitch-black knife was firmly pressed against the blood-colored blade. The bald Five-Old Star's eyebrows were dead. The hole was only within a square inch. If it hadn't been blocked by the long river of blood, the point where the sword tip penetrated would definitely be his shiny head. The cracks appeared on his scarlet blade. Clang. The crisp sound of sword clashing sounded. In the eyes of everyone with disbelief, he ranks among the top 12 masters of the sharp sword, and is known as the first-generation ghost sword that scares the world. It actually broke under the dark tip of the knife. It broke. The black light that swallowed everything destroyed everything that stood in his way. Even the first-generation ghost couldn't resist his etch. After being blocked for less than a moment and 3 seconds, this world-famous demon sword was completely penetrated. Jin Kunluo, who cut off the shackles, continued to penetrate the 5 old stars unabated. But the sacrifice of the first-generation Kaititsu was still effective after all. There was a long bloody river that blocked the way for a while, and there was also the first-generation ghost blocking the way. Although the time for the two to accumulate was not long, it was enough for him to take a breather. As the top official in charge of the government, the bald 5-star is no ordinary figure. Hateful. The bald 5 old star's pupils shrank, and his body shook. As if moving in space, he disappeared directly under Jin Kunluo's blade. After changing shape, he appeared not far from the right front, far away. About 2 or 3 kilometers away. A divine light flashed in Baiyu's eyes. Jin Kunluo raised his hand slightly and wanted to pursue him again. Unfortunately, the bald 5 old stars were already prepared. The first-generation ghost in his hand was so powerful that a long river of blood spurted along the sword light. And Chu, although this kind of attack can be broken by Baiyu with just a raise of his hand. But mean. Do you want to die together? The eyes of the bald 5 old star opened angrily, and the veins on the shiny bald head were exposed. In the blood-colored eyes, there was a determination to defeat the fish and defeat the net. With eternal life and a high status, of course he would cherish his life and be afraid of death. But if he is faced with the fate of death, as a top swordsman, he will definitely not lack the bloody spirit that would rather be broken than broken. The star above his head burst into brilliant light, and the ocean under his feet was tumbling under the instigation of tidal force. In an instant, another unknown body was swallowed up. How much territory? Tisk, do you believe me when I say my hand slipped? Baiyu smacked his lips, slowly took back the Jin Kunluo in his hand, and explained without any sincerity. What do you say? The bald 5 old star stared at Baiyu, not daring to miss any detail on him. Just like this, he was caught off guard and slashed by this guy. If it weren't for the vigilance of a swordsman, he would suddenly draw back the sword at the last moment. Be careful, I'm afraid the grass on the grave is already 3 feet high now. Hee. I missed it just now, I missed it. It's no good for everyone if they die together, right? Baiyu kept laughing, and his tone softened a bit first. Yes. The bald 5 old star took a deep look at Baiyu, and finally nodded. The situation is stronger than the situation. They have already given us a ladder. If we don't follow the slope, we will really get into trouble. A life and death situation is not what he wants. The result of the older you are in the world, the less courage you have. That's good. Baiyu nodded and continued. But don't forget my devil fruit. As he said this, he couldn't help but smile in his eyes. Although he didn't take the opportunity to kill this guy with one blow. Getting 20 devil fruits is also very good. At least, it is enough to make him stronger again. Made great progress. Good. People had to lower their heads under the eaves. Wu Laoxing, who had always been arrogant and aloof, could not help but lower his proud head in front of Baiyu with a look of humiliation. In this case, that's it for now. Baiyu smiled with satisfaction. The electromagnetic force originating from Nami was used by Baiyu in a new way. A powerful suction force quietly emerged and directly captured half of the first-generation ghosts scattered on the battlefield. Seeing helplessly, part of his beloved sword fell into the hands of the enemy. The bald 5 old star suddenly had his teeth cracked, and the sound of the word squeezed out from the gaps between his teeth. How? Baiyu turned his head, raised his eyebrows, and a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. No, it's okay. The 5 bald stars just wanted to show off their power. Before the blood on the first generation ghost had time to spread, the corner of his eye glanced at the dark golden kunluo in Bayu's hand. The black light stung his eyes, as if a basin of cold water was poured over his head, and he suddenly woke up. Fishing law enforcement. The bald 5 old star's pupils shrank, and he immediately understood Bayu's intention. It was clear that he wanted to provoke him, make him lose his mind and take action, and then take the opportunity to kill him. After thinking about this, how could the bald 5 old star dare to explode? His whole body suddenly felt as if he was scared. He huddled under the light of the star, not daring to move, for fear that Bayu would find an opportunity. Anyway, Bayu's actions did not touch his bottom line. No matter how precious a supreme sharp knife is, it is not as valuable as his life in his heart. Tisk, boring. The plan failed. Bayu curled his lips and looked at the tip of the knife in his hand in boredom. The color of the knife was scarlet, and even the broken tip still exuded a coquettish bloodlight and a strong smell of blood. He didn't know how much blood it was made of. It was poured. After playing with it a few times, Bayu threw it directly to Zoro beside him. No, the tip of the sword of the first generation ghost. I originally wanted to get him all over, but something happened and only this little was left. Bayu's usual swordsmanship is the one-sword style. With Jin Kunluo in hand, even if the first generation ghost sword is also the supreme sharp sword, he is not very interested in changing the sword. What's more, what he got is only the tip of the sword. Instead of using it with him, it's ashes in his hand, so it's better to give it to Zoro to enhance his strength. He just bought the second generation ghost, and this sword has a close affinity with him at first sight. I am the strongest officer of the Straw Hats. Author, Super Red. Chapter 249. Thank you very much, Vice Captain. Taking the scarlet broken blade in his hand, Sauron looked at Bayu with eyes full of gratitude. Thanks, no need to use it, it's of no use to me, it will have the greatest effect in your hands. Bayu waved his hand and stopped Sauron's grateful words. Deputy Captain. The tough guy swordsman's eyes were filled with a rare glint of water. He did not hesitate to take personal risks and break the sword of the world's strongest swordsman. Just to give him his broken blade as a token to encourage his growth. Zoro held the broken blade in his hand tightly, letting the blood cut through his palm without changing color on his face. I will definitely kill him. I will definitely get it with my own hands and use his remaining blade to fulfill our agreement. The watery eyes were full of perseverance, and the deep voice carried an unquestionable flavor. Zoro lowered his head, integrated the incomplete tip of the knife into the second generation ghost, and said in his mouth, "Ah! Agreement." Bayu looked at Sauron in confusion, not understanding what the fuss was about. But in this case, it seems good. Feeling the burning fighting spirit in Sauron, Bayu nodded with satisfaction. He high-fived and said, "That's right, it's a promise, I believe you." Hateful. Looking at his sword being given away in front of his eyes. He was also regarded as a target to be killed at will. The bald 5 old star's back teeth were almost chewed out. But under the shock of his Jin Kunluo, he did not dare at all. Acting rashly. I can only curse in my heart. This guy is simply a devil. The faint smile at the corner of Bayu's mouth, in the eyes of the bald 5 old star, is simply like the god of death smiling at him. The 5 devil fruits will arrive soon, and the remaining 5 will be delivered immediately after the world government has raised funds. After explaining the delivery of the devil fruit, the bald 5 old stars looked at Bayu warily. Seeing that he had no intention of moving, he immediately mobilized Uranus's power impatiently. He was afraid that Bayu would cause something bad again, so he didn't dare to wait for a moment longer. Instigated by the tide, the waves swept over the ship underfoot and sailed quickly into the distance. He simply ignored the remaining navy on the field and disappeared at the end of the sea. The three generals who were old, weak, sick, and disabled, and two good friends who had retired for many years were left behind to lead the remaining Navy soldiers to stay pitifully on the battlefield. Call. The natural disaster confrontation has finally come to an end. The miserable Fujitora can finally breathe a sigh of relief and remove the gravity lingering on the field. Bang, he lifted the main ship into the sky, away from the erosion of the waves, and the survivors on the ship amid the howls of ghosts and wolves, it lost the traction of gravity and fell from the sky. It hit the sea heavily, splashing thousands of meters of water, and the water foam it raised paved half of the battlefield. This ship is a newly developed high-end product. The base is otherwise. Fujitora's rough treatment would have destroyed the sea stones covered with Vegapunk into pieces of wood under the huge impact. Hoo-hoo! Fujitora gasped for air, and all the muscles in his body twitched due to the excessive use of the fruit's power. Hawkswin recovered from this lifeless state, but when he raised his head, he bumped into Bayu's handsome face, and his whole body became numb instantly. For the first time, Fujitora secretly hated himself for being too sharp. It's better to be so embarrassed that I can't wait to experience another muscle twitching that will make me lose my strength and lead to death. Although he wanted to pretend to be crazy and pretend he didn't see it, Bayu's half-smiling expression made him break this delusion with tears. White feather. Haha, it's been such a long time no see. I wonder if the promise you made when we were on Cake Island in exchange for the first-generation ghost in the hands of the 5 old stars in exchange for Jin Kunluo is still fulfilled. Actually, we are here today to make a deal with you. As for why the 5 old stars fought with you, I really didn't expect it. Fujitora tightened the purple bathrobe around him and spoke bravely. Anyway, the situation has collapsed to this extent, so it's not easy to risk everything and take a gamble. Maybe he had a short circuit in his brain. The self-defeating Fujitora didn't hold on to the slightest hope, and just talked nonsense to break the deadlock. Yin. Bayu flicked Jin Kunluo's blade and let out a soft groan. His eyebrows were slightly curved, and he glanced at Fujitora indifferently. What do you think? Hey. Well, that probably won't work. Fujitora couldn't stop laughing, and cold sweat broke out on his ravaged face. Bayu's plain look just now made him feel like he was facing death. The power of the fruit was exhausted. With the sword in his hand, Fujitora could not help but break out. Who didn't have the slightest chance of fighting him? As for the reason? Wasn't the lesson learned by the bald 5 old stars just now enough? White feather. Please, for the sake of the soldiers' innocence, please let them go. Most of them came through recruitment and have nothing to do with the grievances between us. Moreover, they basically caused no casualties in the battle just now. What Fujitora said was basically the truth. Judging from the intricate development of the battlefield just now, they are indeed unable to get involved. Finally, he fired thousands of artillery pieces to gain a sense of presence, but when Nami showed off her power, she was stopped on the spot and suffered a big loss. After that, it was directly up to the top brass of the Navy to fight against the Straw Hats. Then Warring States Garp entered one after another, and finally Wu Laoxing pulled Bayu and launched a natural disaster to fight, pulling the war in an unpredictable direction. This group of low-level fish didn't even have a chance to fight after the whole battle. Bayu, please. At the critical moment, Fujitora thought of interceding for his subordinates. Tisk, I'm not interested in this. You've come to the wrong person to ask for mercy. Bayu glanced at his mouth and didn't answer at all. The Navy has never been his established opponent in his mind. Especially when he saw that the Navy and the world government were at odds with each other. He would attack the Navy and destroy them. His interest has dropped to the extreme. He really thinks he is a fool. He cannot see that Wu Laoxing deliberately left the Navy behind. He just wants to vent his anger and kill them all, so that he can condense the remaining strength into a rope. Ah! Begging the wrong person. Magnificent, ruthless, demanding prices. Fujitora had rehearsed Bayu's various reactions in his mind and prepared countermeasures. Only this kind was far beyond his expectation. His face with ravines and crisscrosses, can't help but look astonished. Of course, the rightful owner is there. Bayu nodded in a matter-of-fact manner, turned towards the flower capital, and pursed his lips in the direction of the coastline. Since he didn't want to kill all the remaining navy, he planned to keep them to make trouble for the world government. Then of course he would pass the blame. It became the best choice. I am the strongest officer of the Straw Hats. Author, Super Red. Chapter 250. The rightful owner. Fujitoro looked in the direction Shiroyu pointed. A woman with bunted hair in a kimono, followed by a group of subordinates of various shapes, stood on the coastline and looked at the battlefield from a distance. She didn't look like a simple guy. Ah, the leaders of them are so powerful that they can barely compare with the elite lieutenant generals of the Navy headquarters. Them. Fujitoro looked at Shiroyu in confusion. Although these guys who unexpectedly appeared are quite good, they are nothing compared to the super standard power of the Straw Hats. Fujitora is a little confused. What kind of medicine is Bayu selling in the gourd this time? The leader is the current general of Wano country, Hiri Kojiki. The rest are her bodyguards, namely the 9 red scabbard heroes, Kinemon, Kikunoke, and Nico Viper. They are the controllers of Wano country, and you are invading other people's country. If you want to ask for mercy, of course you have to find the rightful owner. Bayu looked indifferent and explained with a chuckle. A few strange colors flashed in his eyes. He didn't expect that these guys could survive the aftermath of the battlefield intact. It seems that their strength is not what he imagined. So bad. Wano country. I see. Fujitoro lowered his head, thinking about lightning in his heart. After the expression on his face changed several times, he finally calmed down. A flash of purple light flashed, and Fujitora, who was standing at the bow of the ship, arrived in front of Hiri Kojiki in the blink of an eye. Ugh, someone's sudden arrival immediately aroused the vigilance of the 9 red scabbard heroes, and they all drew their swords and pointed them at Fujitora. Don't worry, I mean no harm. Guru. Although he said that, none of the people who faced Fujitora dared to relax. On the contrary, the hand holding the sword tightened a little tighter, obviously becoming more nervous. Even if the fruit ability is drained, Fujitora's strength cannot be underestimated with his unique swordsmanship and taijutsu. The pressure this general with his eyes tightly closed gave them was no weaker than facing Kaido face to face. If it weren't for the vague supporter, Bayu, who was watching the battle not far away, they had already taken the bucket and ran away. This should be the shogun of Wano country, right? What? Fujitora slowly spoke to Kojiki Hiri. He understood the situation and kept his posture very low. As soon as the words came out, Kinemon was stunned. Fortunately, as a general, Kojiki Hiri calmed down. Yes, it's me. Forcibly maintain a posture and refuse to show timidity. This time the Navy entered a Nagashima, and after destroying Kaido's lair, he carelessly listened to his subordinates and rashly led the fleet into Wano country in an attempt to wipe out the remaining remnants of Kaido. It turned out to be all rumors afterwards, but the huge losses caused to your country are irreparable, and the world government is willing to compensate. Please believe that the Navy has always been committed to the peace of the sea. This time it was the plot of a traitor that triggered the war. I hope the general will forgive me. Fujitora tightened the tight bathrobe, leaned forward slightly, and made an apology gesture to a weak woman. He is indeed a high-end politician, and his brains are definitely enough to make Luffy 18 streets and lead 2 turns. Read in an instant, understand the implication of Bayu's words. He talks nonsense without blinking an eye. But as a blind man, Fujitora didn't have to blink. If you make up random drafts without writing them, it will be seen as nonsense by a discerning eye. But Hiri Kojiki really agreed. Since it's a misunderstanding, it's better to resolve it. This elegant girl's eyes flashed with confusion, but she finally bit the bullet and accepted Fujitora's nonsense. Even Kinnaman, who had been desperately safeguarding the dignity of Wano and following the Kojiki clan with his life, and the other 9 red scabbard heroes, did not show any strange expressions on their faces. It's not that they have low IQs and can't see Fujitora's lies, it's just that the strength between the enemy and ourselves is too disparate. Anyone with a discerning eye knows that Fujitora lowered his attitude and gave in just for Bayu's sake. No one who is blind would think that the country of Wano has the qualifications to keep the navy low and small. After losing Kaido's existence, to put it bluntly, how can we stop the navy from invading just by relying on the natural dangers of the inner and outer seas? It's just a dream. As for the Straw Hats and the terrifying existence that controls natural disasters, Bayu. Even if Hiri was immersed in love, she would not think that Bayu would give up sailing with her companions and choose to stay in Wano country for her own sake. Now they can't go down the steps until Bayu leaves. Even if they were worried about the Straw Hats, they would not openly attack Wano country. But with the power of the navy, wouldn't it be easy to secretly stumble him? As for General Fujitora, let's forget about the compensation issue. Hiri struggled for a while, a trace of sadness flashed in her eyes. As a smart man, I gave up the Navy's compensation after all. If a weak country has no diplomacy, even if it wins, how can it dare to ask for spoils from a strong country? The Straw Hats are not Kaido, so they cannot be stationed in Wano. She cannot bear the risk of settling accounts after the fall, and Wano cannot afford it. No, 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 how can this be forgotten? Since damage has been caused, of course compensation must be made. Our world government is not an agency that acts recklessly. Fujitora waved his hand, his face full of seriousness. There's really no need for this. This can be done. This. The two turned around several times, but Fujitora's attitude remained firm. Moonlight Hiri also became numb. Judging from what Fujitora meant, it didn't sound like he was just saying something for fun, but he really wanted to compensate. She didn't know what to do, so she could only look at Bayu with a confused look on her face. Okay, I'll accept it then. Get Bayu's encouraging look, Kwanjai dared to tremble and agree to compensate. That's great, so I'll take my leave now. It's done. Fujitora's bitter face was finally stained with a hint of joy. Finally, he handed over the money for his life, and could leave with peace of mind. The navy, which suppressed the sea with dignity and upheld justice, actually fell to this level. In the sea he bowed his head in front of the thief in exchange for a chance to survive. Thinking about it, it was really inexplicable sadness. Fujitora couldn't help but shook his head. For the new blood of the navy, his face was not worth mentioning. S.A. The same as when he came. Purple light flashed. Fujitora, running the moon step, walked directly through the air and returned to the ship. Farewell. Fujitora didn't want to stay in such a place of right and wrong for a moment. While bidding farewell to everyone in Wano country, he calmly asked the helmsman to start the boat. He was afraid that things would change if it was too late. If Bayu changed his mind, then this time it would really be a disaster. Seize the limited vitality, inherit the fine tradition of the world government, and quickly run away with the Navy bucket. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I am the strongest officer of the Straw Hats. Author, Super Red. Chapter 251. On behalf of the government, I would like to express my deepest apologies to all the citizens, the royal family and its ministers for the harm caused to the country of Wano. The world government will definitely do its best to compensate everyone for the damage caused to Wano country and make everything back to its original state. On the deck of the departing warship, Fujitora spoke with a serious face, full of sincere apologies running through Scar's face. His straight back suddenly bent down, facing the name of Wano country. The controller of the sky, Hiri Kojiki, made a deep 90-degree bow. Mr. Fujitora. The Lord humiliates me to death. In order to protect himself and others from leaving safely, his immediate superior actually bent over and humiliated a woman to such an extent, and even offered to pay huge compensation as the price. The Navy soldiers burst into tears. His name was shouted, and the morale that had been slumped was condensed into a rope in this emotion. Fujitora, Navy. Even Kojiki Hiri, who faced the impact directly, couldn't help being stunned. He had invaded her country, and he should have been extremely hateful, but unexpectedly found that he couldn't hate the man in front of him at all. On the contrary, there is an inexplicable admiration. The whole audience fell into an emotion called shock. Watching this scene, Bayu couldn't help but reveal a strange smile. As expected of you, Fujitora. They keep saying they want an apology and compensation, but in the end they talk about the world government. When we praise our sense of responsibility, we talk about the Navy. When we praise our sense of responsibility, we talk about the world government. Watch the comforting smile someone gives when facing a Marine. Bayu looked like a weasel, and her aunt laughed after successfully stealing the chicken. Tisk, what a thief. I, Bayu, would like to call you the strongest in the way of shirking the blame. Bayu, who had seen through everything again, still had no intention of exposing the truth. Anyway, this is exactly what he wants. The more serious the quarrel between the Navy and the world government is, the happier he will be. Just one yellow sir is not enough, the gravity fruit, manipulating gravity, etc. are also great. The big Buddha fruit, a different kind of Dharma, heaven, elephant, and earth, is also a bit interesting. There's also Aoki's freezing, Garp's iron fist, Green Bull's unknown. Bayu looked at the people on the warship and couldn't help but reveal a smile that was 90% similar to Fujitora's. On the warship, Fujitora, who was arranging the evacuation of the warships in an orderly manner, suddenly felt a chill running down his spine and couldn't help but shudder. Fujitora, are you okay? The green cow next to him looked over at his handsome face and asked with concern. No, it's okay. Maybe it's because there's too much sea breeze and sea water, so you're a little bit cold, right? Fujitora couldn't help but tighten his purple bathrobe. Under Green Bull's admiring gaze, he continued to work hard. He stopped the thunder net, fought with Zoro, lifted the ship, escaped with words, and arranged for evacuation. For the sake of justice in the Navy, Fujitora has really paid too much. Compared to Kizaru, who is a master fisherman, his hard work is really heartbreaking. Bayu, now that everything is over, can we go back to Wano country? Luffy looked at Bayu expectantly. Someone who had just finished vomiting couldn't wait to rush back to Wano country. Needless to say, he must have been thinking about the various meats on the island. Who let these guys deal with the inventory of the Sunshine Wanli? Okay. Then let's go back. Looking at the naval fleet, it completely disappeared at the end of the sea and sky. Bayu, who could finally breathe a sigh of relief, nodded calmly. Yo-ho! Marvelous! To celebrate this great victory, I decided to have a big party to celebrate. Luffy jumped 3 feet high with excitement on his face. Thinking that he would be able to eat meat soon, he was extremely happy. Ah, but Nami is still in a coma after losing her strength. Wei seems to be injured too. Bayu also had a big battle. She is exhausted mentally and needs a good rest. Robin spoke decisively, dragging the little sisters out, not forgetting to take Bayou away as well. If your own man doesn't feel pain for you, who else can you let him feel pain for you? Well, Luffy thought with a thoughtful look on his face. It's impossible not to have a banquet. It's impossible not to have a party in this life. Banquets and the like are of course necessities of life. If you don't have them, you will die. In this case, there is. Luffy's heart and eyes were all about eating meat at the banquet. When he glanced at Sanji, his eyes suddenly lit up like light bulbs. No way. Sanji, who was bored looking at the beautiful woman, suddenly felt a chill, and an unpleasant feeling arose in his heart. It has been decided, Sanji, you will be solely responsible for the preparations for this banquet. After all, among those who can cook, you are the least injured. Looking at a certain chef in a suit, Luffy decided with a happy face. The one he wanted to fight was Peach Rabbit, a quasi-general who lost his supreme sword. His level has not dropped a little. With the blessing of Germa technology, Sanji has no pressure at all when fighting. No, it's not me, am I alone? A certain cook in a suit burst into tears in an instant. He solved the problem of feeding a large boatload of rice buckets by himself. If he was not killed on the battlefield, he would probably be exhausted in the kitchen. Hee, you can ask Sauron for help. Luffy seemed to think it was too much, and tried hard to find helpers for him. Zoro, who was paddling with the disabled Fujitora, was definitely the least injured and the easiest person on the boat. I don't want this green algae gang. I don't want to help this perverted chef. Two words that were almost the same sounded on the field. Snort. The owner of the voice glared with 4 pairs of eyes. After snorting at the same time, he threw his head up with all his strength, each facing one direction. The actions were done in unison, and it seemed that the tacit understanding was worth full marks. Gee, you guys really have a tacit understanding. Jinbei smacked his mouth and couldn't help but speak. Fart, who has a tacit understanding with him? Fart, who has a tacit understanding with him? The denials in unison made Jinbei's expression even weirder. He also said that without tacit understanding, you are almost stuck together. The blue fat man Jinbei complained. Shut up. The two glared at each other. After noticing each other's actions, they turned their guns at the same time, met each other's fire-breathing eyes, and glared at each other. Poof. Ha ha ha. The melon eaters who were watching could no longer hold back their expressions and burst into laughter. Laughter filled the boat, and everything seemed to be filled with a peaceful atmosphere. Humph, stop eating if you laugh again. After swiping the knife fiercely, Sanji looked at the kitchen and walked over. If the trouble continues, I don't know what trouble will happen. Cut. Zoro curled his lips, unable to wait any longer, and walked towards the deck with 3 famous swords in his arms. Bayou gave him the first-generation Ghost Tetsu broken blade, but he hasn't studied it carefully yet. I am the strongest officer of the Straw Hats. Author, Super Red. Chapter 252. Yin. A clear sword roar sounded. The terrifying aura followed and shot straight into the sky. An extremely sharp knife appeared with a slash that seemed to be dyed with a little blood on the edge. Swoosh. The sword flashed, and the buildings it touched slid down one after another. Like a hot knife cutting through butter, there is no resistance at all. Green algae head. Sanji, in a suit and tie, ran out of the busy kitchen, with stains on his hands from washing the dishes. His face was full of anger, and he wanted to beat the culprit into a pie. Among the comrades on the ship, he was the only one who could show such a level slasher. Except for Zoro, he doesn't think about anyone else at all. As for Bayou, the vice captain has always been lazy, and he will only open the door when he is full and full. Perverted chef, is it you again? What do you want to do again? After slowly taking back his hand and merging the broken blade, the improved version of second-generation Ghost Tetsu emerged. The slender blade had a bit of bright red on the dark blade. After finishing his work, Zoro looked at a certain chef with an unhappy look on his face. "You ask me what I want to do? I was cooking fine in the kitchen, but you suddenly hit me with a knife and I accidentally lost all the ingredients. What's going on?" Sanji almost went crazy thinking about having to scrap and redo a pot of food that he had finally finished. "Well, that's not because you're too good." Zoro's face was a little weird, and he said with a tear in his throat. Although he felt a little unjust, he still didn't want to bow his head in front of Sanji. "Bastard green algae head. Do you want to taste my devilish legs?" Sanji yelled angrily. He was so angry that he wanted to fuck him on the spot. Sexy cook, who is afraid of whom? Now that things have happened, of course Zoro will not show any timidity and pushes forward with his scalp. Bang bang bang, the slash of the blade, and the flames on his feet, collide with each other and splash out a large amount of fireworks. Without a word, the two happy enemies got into a fight directly on the boat. Fortunately, these two guys still had their senses preserved. They only looked fierce in the fight, but they were reserved secretly, and there was no real fire. Otherwise, the aftermath of their battle would have to be it's impossible to plow the sunshine miles. "What are you doing, demolishing your home?" But even so, the noise caused by them obviously woke up other people. "Nana, Nami. Why are you here? Nami, aren't you coming out of a coma? Just woke up." An unexpected figure appeared. The two people stopped attacking and looked over with curious faces. "It's not like you, who fight regardless of the place, actually do it on the boat. I wonder if it will cost money to repair a damaged place." Nami had a look on her waist with a look of displeasure, but she was very angry. Just when she woke up, she heard crackling sounds outside. She was so frightened that she didn't even come back to her senses, so she quickly picked up the weather stick on the bedside and ran away. "Come out. I thought someone was attacking me, but I didn't expect it was this pair of enemies making trouble again." Fortunately, during the fight, the boat was not knocked out and caused any trouble, otherwise she would not only make these two idiots know what pain is. What a shame. The prophets are falling from the sky. With Nami here, these two guys can't be so violent anymore. But glaring and sarcastic remarks are definitely indispensable. "Green algae head, please pay for the glowing dishes I made. Don't even think about asking me to sit with you for a while, you sexy cook." "Ah. Zi." The four eyes glared angrily, and their gazes collided in the air, almost causing electric sparks. The air also began to heat up because of the anger of these two guys. If they continue to fight against each other, they will see that these two people are going to continue again. The unfinished battle just now. Nami, who was watching the show with her arms akimbo next to her, couldn't sit still. "Fool! Stop it all!" The housekeeper yelled angrily, fearing that the two guys would ignore her voice. She also tried her best to swing a weather stick to add BGM to her voice to make it more eye-catching and avoid being ignored by the two guys who were arguing. "Falling. But, it seems to be eye-catching. But, it seems to be a little too eye-catching." Boom, thunder on a sunny day, terrifying thunder falling from the sky. Two incandescent light pillars penetrated down fiercely. Caught off guard, the mountain fell. Gigi, Saran were hit one after another. They were hit by the thunder beam falling from the sky. The violent thunder directly electrocuted the two of them into skeletons in the sea of thunder. The two people fell down with expressionless faces, and two balls of black air spat out from their mouths. It felt like their souls had been electrocuted. Moreover, there was a faint smell of meat coming from these two people. Nami felt that in the past week, she was afraid that she would have to give up all meat and prepare to become a vegetarian. "Nami, Nami, are you too cruel? Zoro stared at an afro and said to Nami intermittently. Fortunately, his physique is maximum. If it were up so, he would have to hit GG on the spot. NA, has Nami-san's electromagnetic power advanced again? A certain chef was burnt black by the electricity, and his eyes turned into heart shapes. As expected of Sanji, even if he only has half a life left, he is still not immune to the attraction of beautiful women. Me, I didn't use electromagnetic force. I can't even use the electromagnetic gun. I'm not Enel and can control lightning. This is all the power of the weather stick, which Upso helped me do to control the weather. Nami waved the weather stick in her hand and explained anxiously. Looking at her at a loss, it was obvious that she had not expected this situation. What happened? What happens? Could it be that the Navy still doesn't give up? One after another figures flashed out from the boat and surrounded Nami and the others. Zoro and Sanji started fighting with their fists and kicks. It was still a small fight, and the movement was just like that. But the two lightning bolts just now were real big movements. Directly alerted all the companions on the boat, even Baiyu was no exception, and they rushed over one after another. It's Nami-san's attack. It's all our fault. The green algae head and I got into a fight. Nami-san tried to stop us from fighting so as not to damage the Sunshine Miles. So I took a shot with the weather stick. Sanji, who was eaten to death by the beautiful woman, took the initiative to explain that he had accepted the responsibility. In order to prevent himself from being damaged. Little lowly Meili looked at the scorched black marks on the deck and felt like crying without tears. In order to avoid fighting it affected the hull of the ship, so thunder was directly summoned, splitting the deck into charred black. What the hell is this? Great weather? Is the weather stick already so powerful? The power of that blow just now is almost on par with my Lei Ying's level. Even if it is not at the level of the four emperors, it is definitely higher than the ordinary level of the emperor's deputy. Enil shook the golden stick in his hand, with a slight fear on his face. This level of lightning is not a common commodity. Even he cannot ignore it casually.